Cathay, but from the north, leading it to discover new lands. For its part, Portugal...
I always think it's so interesting how little moments in time and history could have changed everything. Imagine at this moment Britain was like in a civil war or weakened or something, and actually Portugal or Spain would have gotten North America or something. The whole world would have changed. What if the English would have been the Caribbean first? Something like that. Everything
with Vasco da Gama to Spanish.
Like imagine would have been different. Imagine France would have won. You all speak French now. French would be the world language. Oh là là, merci, bonjour pour la stream de la
in exchange for Florida.
Ta mère est une grande cul. The music. Oh, yeah, Yugoslavian jazz. Okay, here we go.
Century, these were roughly the territory in the middle of the 15th century.
Crazy, man. They thought that that's the world. That's insane. Today I was a lot in the car listening to radio, and the Aral Lake, which was but it completely dried up because greedy Russian cotton farmers used all its water.
These were roughly the territories known to Europe. Despite the discovery 500 years earlier of a tip of North America by a Viking tribe, the continent and the tens of millions of souls that populate it are still unknown to European powers.
Must have been a fucking weird time. Imagine you sit at home and suddenly you get a message. I found a new continent. Two of them. A lot of fucking shit going on there. Like, what?
For centuries, Europe is mainly oriented towards Asia, from where silk, spices, and other goods originate. Trade routes from China and East Indies are...
Let's go to the ground here, okay? I'm very uneducated. That's why I'm a streamer. So silk is made in Asia. A, what is silk? B, how is it made? And C, why is it not in Europe? They tried, but what happened? The EU climate wasn't good enough.
Lucrative for those who control them.
Okay.
By weaving a maritime network across the Mediterranean Sea, the powerful republics of Venice and Genoa dominate.
But in this time, wasn't the Western power super strong? They're just like, China, we're the boss, you know?
Trade in Europe.
Unlike nowadays.
But the monarchies of the Iberian Peninsula aim to break this monopoly and set off in search of new routes. More efficient ships are built, boosting exploration of the Atlantic Ocean.
We didn't have a CIA yet that could destabilize. Okay.
A native of the Republic of Genoa, Columbus lived in Lisbon. The young navigator dreams of discovering a new road to Cathay and Cipango, found in present-day China and Japan. According to his calculations, the territories are close enough to attempt a crossing.
Isn't that crazy? They thought the world... Isn't that so cool, man? Isn't that crazy? They thought that it's the world, man. You know, I'm going to be nerdy for a second. George R.R. Martin always uses real-life history for Game of Thrones. And that shows that in Game of Thrones, they think that this leads to Essos. But there's America, and I think in Game of Thrones also there's a whole new continent.
He presents the project to the Portuguese king, who refuses to finance it as the country focuses on the exploration of a route via Africa. Columbus then tries his luck with Spanish Catholic kings. After some hesitation...
How do flat earthers explain Pearl Harbor? Like, you can't fucking tell me that flat earthers think Japan went all the way... They think it was a hoax. Fucking retards.
They eventually agree to fund the expedition.
If it makes no sense with my agenda, it's a hoax. Let me go back to sniffing glue.
Christopher Columbus sets off on his voyage in 1492 as the head of 3 ships and a crew of 90 men. After 70 days of sailing, the expedition discovers an island in the Bahamian archipelago. The first encounter with the natives is peaceful and cordial.
Is it Bahamas?
Convinced he found the East Indies, Columbus calls them Indians. For 3 months, he hops from island to island in search of Cipango.
Don't say, I'm not looking at shit. But I don't get it. Jamaica, Cuba.
Return to Spain, he is welcomed as a hero.
Columbus be like this India now.
This time with 17 ships, La Isabella is created in honor of the Queen of Castile.
That is Haiti. Cuba is to the left.
Columbus as governor. He continues to explore surrounding areas.
Treaty of Tequila.
To avoid wars in newly discovered lands, the Spanish and Portuguese kings meet and come up with a plan to share the territories. A meridian is...
Dude, I always wonder, I always dream, right, that one day the simulation theory is real. We all live in simulation and you can simulate being on that ship. Imagine you're going west and you find new land. Like, you find the Caribbean and all these oceans, all these beaches are yours, man. You can do what you want. It's
with
fucking
newly
crazy.
discovered lands.
It's probably very bad because you have a lot of diseases and shit and everything's very ugly and dirty.
Spain, and those in the east going to Portugal.
But
Moreover,
man,
the Pope
I can't even walk to the supermarket without feeling anxiety, man. And these guys
Spanish
doing
kings
this shit, man.
with evangelizing the new territories, Cathay, but from the north, leading it to discover new lands. For its part, Portugal...
I always think it's so interesting how little moments in time and history could have changed everything. Imagine at this moment Britain was like in a civil war or weakened or something, and actually Portugal or Spain would have gotten North America or something. The whole world would have changed. What if the English would have been the Caribbean first? Something like that. Everything.
With Vasco da Gama eventually succeeds
so
in
much,
opening
man.
a new
It changes
sea
the whole
route to
world.
India. During the second expedition, Portuguese ships head
England
westward
is
to
yellow,
bypass
Spain is
strong
red.
sea
Yeah, this,
currents. They're located east of the meridian of Tordesillas. Colonies are quickly established there.
America. America is named after the Italian intelligent guy Amerigo Vespucci.
In 1506, Christopher Columbus dies without knowing he had discovered a new continent. It is Amerigo Vespucci, another navigator who had traveled several times to the land, who first suggests that it's a new world. The continent is then named America after him. Around Hispaniola, explorers called the Conquistadors set off to discover and conquer new land.
I have one of these in
Rapidly, the condition of the natives deteriorates. Lands are stolen.
Like, I never knew certain stuff. Like, there's a lot of black people in Jamaica. They don't originate there. It was them bringing slaves over, and then the Jamaicans made their own culture, man. It's so crazy,
People
bro.
are enslaved, and moreover, previously unknown diseases imported by Europeans spread through the continent and decimate populations.
Oh, Corona.
In Cuba, Conquistador Hernán Cortés hears of a city called Tenochtitlan, a supposed
To all my Spanish viewers, you guys used to be someone. Just
city of gold.
I love you guys.
Having
You're
reached
beautiful.
land during his expedition in search of the city, Cortés realizes he is in the Aztec Empire, which rules over surrounding territories and peoples. He takes advantage of the situation to propose or impose by force that the locals become part of the Spanish Empire. His strategy pays off. Cortés is guided by locals to their capital, where they receive a warm welcome.
Dude, imagine that. That blows my mind. Imagine I put you in a simulation right now. And you are now a random dude in the party of Hernán Cortés, walking west into Tenochtitlan, into a world you've never seen before. And you just experience it. The smells, the feeling. But that must be insane, bro. That must blow your fucking mind, man.
Just south of the continent, Ferdinand Magellan, seeking to go around the world,
and then
discovers a strait that would bear his name and enters the Pacific Ocean. The following year, war breaks out in Tenochtitlan. The Spanish and their allies impose a siege of 75 days around the capital. Moreover, a smallpox epidemic eventually exhausts the Aztec people who surrender.
Also, yeah, if we ever meet aliens, the biggest issue is going to be certain bacteria and viruses, because they have a different immune system, we have a different immune system. You have to, this shows on a small scale what will happen with aliens. We have to be very careful with all the diseases and stuff.
Cortés enters the city and becomes the governor of New Spain.
And war. Where does the name Mexico from, and what does it mean? Why Mexico? What is that? Where does that originate from? The Mexica people. So the Spanish did not rename it themselves, like, oh, we're the Spanish, we're making our own name.
These cultivate local products previously unknown in Europe, such as maize, potato, tobacco, and cacao.
Maize? Is that English?
These products, as well as gold and silver obtained from conquests and from mines, are exported to Europe. Settlements also take a religious turn with the arrival of the Franciscans, who wish to establish an even purer church than back home and baptize.
This shit always blows my mind. There's so many religious people in Mexico, right? Oh, God. with all the respect, Twitch admin, don't ban me, nowadays you're gonna be careful. In a lot of cases on this planet, the only reason that you are religious or have a cross is because some dude killed all your fucking ancestors and said, this is your religion now, bitch. Like, no offense, no offense. But what, if an Islamic country would have taken that, you will be Islam now, man. It's so fucking random.
Conquistador Francisco Pizarro hears of the supposedly rich Inca Empire. After several unsuccessful expeditions, he returns with an army in 1531.
The land of the
Inca
war god,
Empire
the place
is
of
already weakened
Mexico.
by smallpox, with the disease claiming the life of its emperor a few years earlier, sparking a succession war. During a
The capital building of Mexico City is built from the old stones of the Aztec Palace of Montezuma. Fuck off. You're telling me that this is built from ancient stones from Tenochtitlan. Fuck off. I don't believe you a second. It is true? How can they prove? Fuck off. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. We're underneath or some shit. Thank you. Like, this is fresh stone. Maybe somewhere in there, yeah. Jesus, that's kind of fucking sick, man.
meeting between Pizarro and the new emperor Atahualpa, the latter is captured and executed despite several tons of gold received for his release. French Protestants also tried to colonize the New World, but they
Quebec,
failed
huh?
because of existing Spanish and Portuguese forces and because of adverse climatic conditions and diseases.
Oh. Oh, they're
Eventually,
French.
more resources are allocated into
Yeah, don't they do Louisiana and shit and Quebec or some
colonization,
stuff?
and New France is founded in
So
order
one day they have like a French-Canadian streamer move to Texas and nobody understands what he says.
to develop trade in fishing and furs. The English and Dutch quickly follow suit and
Quebec.
settle along the coast. The colonies would fit
New York was first New Amsterdam. Yeah, the first ever slaves on North America was New Amsterdam by the
taking
Dutch,
place in Europe.
I think.
Generally, the French ally with local tribes.
Okay,
In the
come on.
mid-17th century, the slave trade blows up. European ships go to Africa loaded with goods which are exchanged against slaves who are transported in harsh conditions to America, where they are exchanged against local products and gold.
I said North America.
Slaves are then
not
mainly
global.
used in plantations, while the ships returning to Europe sell American products at high prices.
The French had the middle?
63.
No wonder the flyover states were so useless.
New France lost the fourth and final intercolonial war. The colony then comes under control of the British, who cede a
shit.
portion to Spanish.
Like, imagine would have been different. Imagine France would have won. You all speak French now. French would be the world language. Oh là là, merci, bonjour pour la stream
Territories
de la
in
Gigère.
exchange for Florida.
Ta mère est une grande cul.
With
Luckily
war
that didn't
taking a
happen, right?
financial toll on the United Kingdom, colonies are made to pay through new taxes. In response, 13 colonies and declare independence. Thus begins a new war between the United Kingdom and these colonies, who are supported by France, Spain, and the United Province of the Netherlands. In 1783, the British are forced to recognize the independence of the United
It's
States.
so late. I'm still 200 years away from
While
that.
Russia begins to establish settlements in northwestern coastal territories, Spain finds itself weakened because of a war against France. Its colonies begin to proclaim independence, and Spain is quickly forced to withdraw and recognize the new states. Texas declares independence from Mexico and asks to join the United States, creating tension between the two countries. A war breaks out.
This is, if you ever ask me, Tommy, name a period that you know nothing about. This whole US versus Mexico thing here in 1845, I know nothing about that.
And swings to the advantage of the United States,
Like zero,
who also
man.
sees California and New Mexico.
Again, another example. Imagine Mexico would have won that. Same. Yeah, I know nothing about that. Imagine Mexico would have
Oregon
won
is
that,
then
man.
shared between the British colonies and the United States.
Interesting though, why would the United States make a deal with the British colonies? The United States has just beaten King George, whatever, in the Civil War. Wouldn't the US be like, oh, fuck you, imperialist scum, freedom, and they take Canada? Why didn't they take Canada?
In 1867, the United States buys Alaska from the Mapuche, are the
War of
last natives
1812. I've never even heard of the War of 1812.
to have resisted
No
attempts
idea.
at colonization.
Oh, they took the Falklands,
However,
right?
Argentina and Chile launched the southern
Britain even burned down the White House in 1812. I know actually jack fucking
Conquest
shit
in order
about
to
the
have
War of
access to both
1812. I never
oceans.
even heard about that.
The entire
They burned the
continent
White House
is
down. I've never heard
conquered.
that. Okay. The War of 1812. I legit know fucking jack shit about it. I have no idea. Like, never heard of it. Where does the name Canada come from? Why Canada? What's the history behind this word? Natives, like Indian people, Native Americans, they were called Canadians.
1812, the young nation of the United States took on the...
It's also the native word for a settlement.
...powerful navy in the world in a war that would affect more than just the former colonies and their colonizer. The United States of America first gained freedom from the British in an 8-year-long...
I want to actually really be educated. In 1776. June 4th, 1776. I was right. They won in 1783
US
though.
and Britain once again was the role of the Native Americans. And as a fan of our channel, you should check out our friends over at
Okay, what could that be? What could Curiosity Stream be? I say it's an app that tells you where to find something. Like you're like One Punch Man and it says it's right there. It's a learning app? What?
Curiosity Stream. This is my personal favorite streaming service. A place where I can watch thousands of incredibly well-made documentaries and learn more about different topics, including what I love most, history. One of my favorite documentaries is about the topic of today's video.
I've never heard of that. How do they have licenses for that? How can they keep up with Netflix and Amazon and shit and HBO?
During the Revolution, the Native Americans mostly supported the Brits, who they hoped would continue to restrict expansion from the US settlers into Native American territory. When Britain failed to maintain its rule over the colonies, the United States eventually accelerated its takeover of native land, causing even more friction between the American societies. This friction only grew stronger.
Why is this point here empty? Is this a graphical mistake, or is there a legendary colony that is like, bro, you ain't taking us? Is this Asterix and Obelix? It's a mistake.
On, as Britain remained a driving force of the discord, since not only had the natives taken its side in the revolution, but the British also openly encouraged the Native Americans to fight back against their antagonists. By 1812, this, combined with a few other factors, led to the development of a new war. While the United States was
You probably do this in Victoria too, right?
Clearly unhappy with the united opposition from Britain and the natives.
To me, always like 1800 to 1900 is an era I just don't know shit about. I don't know why. Like Bismarck, Germany, I have no clue. This entire area, I'm like, what the fuck? You know why? You know why? Because there's no fucking video games about it.
They were also infuriated by allegations that the Royal Navy was utilizing a tactic known as impressment to take US men for their own troops. On top of this, the ongoing strife between Britain and France had a notable impact on the United States. Heavily locked in their own struggle, the warring nations tried to restrict trade from neutral countries and punish anyone who attempted to ignore the constraints. This put the United States in a detrimental position due to their inability to continue trade with either nation.
When the British landed in pre-Canada, they developed ocean sickness disease and all was on the verge of death. But the natives gave them medicine to cure their sickness. When they got hold of the medicine, they took over and killed and left them to die.
Isn't that the story everywhere? Where, thank you for the donation, where every time people landed somewhere, the natives tried to help them and got fucked over for it? Maybe that's how humans will one day, we're gonna land on a planet with nice aliens and we just fuck them over. That's something I never understood about. This is gonna be edgy. I have to be careful because Twitch toss and shit about, come on. One thing I never understood about you Americans is, why the fuck do you celebrate Thanksgiving? Hey, let's celebrate the day where the natives gave us food because we're fucked, and then we fucking genocided them later for the next 100 years. Well, I never understood that. Like, you're sitting there, white guys with a turkey and shit, but you, aren't you celebrating a genocide? Because America? It's like, the turkey represents the Indians giving us the turkey. That was the Indians now. Oh, it's about the turkey, it's about the food and the capitalism and eating.
Unless they wanted to risk invoking the wrath of the other side. While France took a more laid-back approach to ensure the US abstained from doing business with the British, the latter was more aggressive about the matter. On January 7th, 1807, Britain issued an order in council Portugal, stating, "It is hereby ordered that no vessel shall be permitted to trade from one port to another, both which ports shall belong to or be in the possession of France or her allies, or shall be so far under their control as the British vessels may not freely trade."
Understood that? What he's doing is right-click trade embargo. That's what he's doing.
To obey these restrictions would be subject to seizure by the Royal Navy, cargo and all. By November, the original order was expanded, now to include all the ports and places of allies, or of any other country
but
at
that's
war
humans.
with
History's not that
and
important,
all
right?
other
To a lot of
ports
people.
or places in Europe, from which,
It's more about
although
TikTok.
not at war with His Majesty, the British flag is excluded, and all ports or places in the colonies belonging to His Majesty's enemies. In
That's why people love
retaliation,
communism.
France, under the command
Alter, how big was fucking France, man? Jesus. Dude, Napoleon.
of Napoleon Bonaparte, issued the Milan Decree.
God damn, his
which
aggressive
said
expansion malice
that every ship
probably was very
to
high.
whatever
He
nation
probably
it
got a
may
coalition
belong,
against him.
that shall have submitted to be searched by an English ship or to a voyage to England, or shall have paid any tax whatsoever to the English government, is thereby, and for that alone, declared to be denationalized, to have
Seven
forfeited
coalition?
the protection of its king, and to have become English property. Adding on, Napoleon declared that any of the aforementioned ships that enter French ports or
When I see ships like this, you know what I miss? You know what I really miss? A big pirate game. When I was young, pirate games were a big thing. I will never forget, there was a game called Pirates of the Caribbean. It had the name of the movie, but it was completely not related to the movie. You were a random guy or Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Sea of Thieves is a bit childish, isn't it? Like a fucking... I mean, Skull and Bones is coming this year, right? Isn't it?
Are good and
I miss pirate shit, man. You guys even said you can be a pirate in EU4 or some shit?
Nation forced to reply. U.S. President Thomas Jefferson signed the Embargo Act in December of 1807, blocking all international trade from American ports and taking direct aim at Britain. Unfortunately for America, the act backfired and turned the U.S. into more of a victim than anyone else. Emphasizing this
The U.S. being a victim, it's gonna be the last time in history.
point, the Minister to France himself even said, "Here it is not felt, and in England it is forgotten." The effects of the Embargo Act ultimately pushed the U.S. into an economic depression, and it had to be repealed less than 2
I've never heard of
years
this before.
after
It's
the
fucking
initial
insane.
signature. In its place, the Non-Intercourse Act was passed, which directly forbade
The Non-Intercourse Act. The non-subs are still under it this day. Nobody knew.
with Britain and France and their colonies. When this new act still proved to be ineffective, the United States tried once again, this time passing Macon's Bill number 2 in May of 1810. This bill lifted trading bans and stated that if either France or Britain removed their own restrictions, the U.S. would re-establish an embargo with the opposing nation. By August, Napoleon enacted a plan to exacerbate tension between Britain and the United States, and it ultimately worked. He first told the new president, James Madison, that he intended
Like, I've never heard of James Madison.
to exempt
As a
the
European.
U.S. from...
Do Americans know all their presidents? Probably not. Do Americans have all presidents in school? That's too much time, right? You just look at the good ones. The guys that did something, huh? How many? You think I can do 10? George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Donald Trump, Obama, George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Easy 10, man. Easy 10. Richard Nixon, JFK, 12. Abraham Lincoln. Come on, one more. Joe Biden. There you go. Ronald Reagan, yeah. Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter, yeah. I've heard of them, but I don't know much about them. I just, as a European that doesn't know much about your country and culture, Americans, what I always heard is, it sounds like Teddy Roosevelt was the best president. You know, Teddy Roosevelt once held a speech with a bullet in his side, man. That's what I always hear, man. Lincoln was the best. Lincoln sounded really great. I was watching the Lincoln movie the other day. The Berlin Decree proclaimed that the British Isles are declared to be in a state of blockade and forbade all correspondence or commerce with Great Britain. The British subjects found in the territory of France and blah blah blah. The Milan Decree was issued in 1807 by Napoleon I of France to enforce the 1806 Berlin Decree. Okay, it's all about embargoes and shit.
Okay. Constraints against Britain in November of that year, despite the fact that
George
Napoleon
Washington, Lincoln,
never
Roosevelt,
actually
and then
followed
FDR.
through on his proclamation. Britain and the United States were now on the brink of all-out war. The final straw came when the Battle of Tippecanoe unfolded in late 1811 as the U.S.
I always say, I always get a lot of shit from Americans. I was watching a very, very long Vietnam War documentary. There's one on Netflix. Check it out. It's super long, man. It goes into the Vietnam War with great detail. And there was this president, and he seemed so intelligent to me. He took over Vietnam, and there's a phone call between him and another guy, and he's like, bro, Vietnam is a disaster. We gotta get out. This is fucking dumb. And everything he said, Johnson. He sounded, I don't know much about him, just in the documentary, Lyndon Johnson. He sounded super intelligent. He's like, this is fucking stupid shit. Our boys are dying for fucking nothing and shit. He sounded really cool.
U.S. troops claimed victory over the Native Americans, wishing to stop
it's on
further
Netflix.
expansion.
Do Netflix Vietnam War. It's a huge
Given
documentary.
the United States was fairly confident
in
the belief that the British were supplying the natives with weapons from Canada, a faction of the U.S. Republican Party known as the Warhawks began a heavy push to...
There's a ranking of presidents? Well, how would you rank them? What am I looking at? Sorry. This is some kind of study and they look who's the best. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison. I actually don't know this. Public opinion is George Washington, Abe Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Lincoln, again, I'm not super educated about it, but I was watching the Abraham Lincoln movie and then I read about him. And Abraham Lincoln looked like a guy, man, that was very far ahead of his time. A great man that did not settle with the South. He's like, no more slavery and fuck off. Let's fight till the end. And he really, man, Abe Lincoln looked like a very
declaration of war at last.
Intelligent man. And you have to always be careful, though. I think that historical figures that are very far away in time are often heroized. You very often think about them too good. Abraham Lincoln. I wish we had someone like that nowadays, but men like this don't exist nowadays anymore. Or if they exist, they go into the politics anymore because they're not just gonna get fucked there, or they get fucking shot in the head.
June
like
18th,
Mr.
Against Britain, despite contention about the issue coming from both the House and Senate. I'm
a German. I want to know more about Germany in the 18 to 1900s. I don't know shit. Like one day there's World War I and then Hitler comes. I know that, but what was before that?
Problem emerged as well.
Germany was like little states, and Germany was very late uniting itself, and then they united and shit.
Britain decided to suddenly repeal their trade restrictions before news of the US declaration of war actually reached the British over a month.
Looking at Britain, I was listening to the radio today. Scotland is going ham, huh? Scotland has elections soon, and the elections will show how much mood the Scottish have to vote for Scots. They want to get away. And they're like very mad because Boris Johnson did Brexit and the English voted for Brexit, but we didn't really want it, and no one cares about us. My great people of Scotland. I'm actually 25% Scottish, and I think they shall be free, brothers.
Respond to the call of war and waited to see how the Americans would react to their repeals. When the U.S. got wind of this surprising development, they were in turn unsure of how the Brits would react to their declaration of war. Ultimately, the United States decided to follow through on its proclamation and did so by invading Canada, which was...
I've never known the US invaded Canada. What? I've never in my entire 30 years, I never heard that.
British colony at the time. While the American troops hoped to capture Canadian land to force Britain into negotiation, they had no such success. No one was prepared for war. The British and French have been busy fighting their own battles, and the US military was grossly ill-suited to take on the likes of Britain. The defeats were plenty and humiliating for the Americans. One excessively humbling loss for the US happened when General William Hull surrendered Fort Detroit on August 16, 1812, and his own army to the British troops, and allowed Michigan territory to be deemed as part of Britain. Chased across the
you guys are all saying the war was a stalemate, not much happened, but why do you guys then say that the English burned down the White House? They must have gotten pretty far, or was it like a terrorist attack or some shit?
Thank you, which was a mix of British and Native American troops, and knowing that his daughter and grandchild were in the fort, he decided to give up without a single
It was a naval invasion. Oh, it's like, oh, so Chicken Little Plate, you're saying, got naval invaded everywhere again because you never fucking put some garrisons?
Disgraceful failure led to an uptick in Native American raids in the Northwest and British conflict under the command of Major General Henry Proctor. Adding insult to injury, U.S. Brigadier General Henry Dearborn struggled to make any progress on the northeastern border because the militias in New England were not supportive of the war and uninterested in coming together for an attack on Montreal. By October, the Americans were finally able to get some momentum as Major General Stephen von Rensselaer led an army of 3,100 militiamen into the Battle of Queenston Heights. Rensselaer sent some advanced units across.
Whenever I hear about this stuff, it's interesting because I have a story about this. I wonder how much war equipment is still in the ground for archaeologists. True fucking story. I just visited my dad in our old neighborhood, Halle Silberhöhe, South Halle, where I was born. They just found 7 English bombs from World War II there. Straight up 7 fucking bombs, dude. What in 2021, bro? Insane, man. And everybody in like 20,000 kilometers, people in South Africa have to be evacuated, man.
The river,
fucking hell, dude. So much shit still in the ground. Thank you, English people in the chat. Because of you, the trams don't drive today.
Overcome by British forces as the rest of the American troops refused to join the fight. 925 US soldiers were then captured by the British, despite Major General Isaac Brock on the British side being killed during the battle. Yet again, the Americans took another hit in 1813 when an attempt to retake Detroit resulted in a massacre of U.S. prisoners by their Native American opponents. On top of that, Brigadier General Henry Dearborn was replaced by Major General James Wilkins.
I think I heard that before. James Wilkins. I heard that before in my life.
Last, though,
the name
in
rings.
September of 1813, U.S. Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry scored a major naval victory at Lake Erie.
People want reaction streams? Dude, let's at least name states, though. We have to name states in here, though. Let's at least name the states.
On the American side, when the Battle of the Thames erupted the following month, the U.S. finally defeated the British and Native American allied forces. The next spring season, at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, another win for the United States followed in the summer, July of 1814, at the Battle of Chippewa, but it was short-lived, as the Battle of Lundy's Lane ended in a bloody stalemate shortly after.
Dude, this is just stalemate the whole time, man.
The real deciding factor in the war came when Napoleon faced his first exile, allowing Britain to shift more focus to the discord with the United States. The British sliced through the U.S., destroying government buildings, including the White House.
Dude, I never heard that. Is there a picture of that? Some artist made a picture. What the fuck? It looks like Donald Trump. Oh, man. Well, back then it was much less epic in a way. There was less going on over there.
Role of Washington, D.C. The Brits then tried to push farther into Baltimore by September under the authority of General Robert Ross, but were repulsed at the Battle of North Point, where General Ross was killed.
It's crazy how in the Civil War you know all these general names. Even as a German, I know all these generals, Lafayette and shit, but I don't know any of these.
In the battle that inspired the U.S. national anthem.
That battle inspired your anthem.
More British troops were fought off at Fort McHenry. As these conflicts raged on, peace talks began in Ghent and eventually resulted in a signed treaty on December 24th, 1814. Still, just as with the declaration of war, the news was...
Because the battle was over and U.S. flag was still there, and then you say, oh, can you still see the flag?
Delayed and took until February.
Man, I'm learning so much here in 30 minutes of stream because I'm actually doing reactions.
And end the war.
What?
The Treaty of Ghent reverted things back mostly to how they were before the combat, with a status quo antebellum. All territory was returned. Britain repealed their trade restrictions, stopped supporting the Native American revolts, and
Great War, man. When you get accidental white peace by a buck in Hoi 4.
The war was essentially a draw, and the only real losing side was the Native Americans, who had high hopes for British help in stopping U.S.
They got
expansion.
fucked, man.
Britain was able to claim victory against the French, and in a way, against the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. had the pride of more or less winning their second war of independence.
Education, 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 man. Watch this, watch this. Yeah, chill the fuck out.
She slipped in my fingers like sand, further she had a man. just sitting here sad. Oh well, ship sail. She slipped through my fingers like sand. Further she out of hand. Now I'm just sitting here sad.